January of 2020, a few months before the release of Resident Evil 2 Remake, I made a video titled The Critique of the State of Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. At the time that I made that video, all I had was my PS3 and the small catalog of games from PS2 Classics on PS4. I felt as though the survival horror genre was on the way out. Luckily, later that year, I bought that PC off of Superchill, and I was welcomed to a whole new world of survival horror, both from my past and the present. I'd like to do a bit of a reply to my past self, and let anyone else who might be in the same place I was a few years ago and has access to a PC know that survival horror is not dead. It just went underground for a bit. If that interests you, then let's begin. I originally played I Am Scared and Cry of Fear in college, on a friend of mine's computer. For our purposes, we'll call that friend Ed, like Radical Edward from Cowboy Bebop. When we weren't living our own survival horror story, like going to a Pizza Hut or on closing time, and as soon as we step foot, the damn lights turn off and we're not sure if the door locked behind us, or walking the streets of a college town at 3 a.m., we were at their dorm, playing video games and eating shit from the freezer. Seeing screenshots of this game back then, I was a bit skeptical, but after a few minutes of playing, I was hooked. The game takes place from the first-person perspective of an unnamed protagonist. The graphics are heavily pixelated and leave much to the imagination. However, what this game lacks in graphics, it makes up for in creative ways. Before Doki Doki Literature Club, this game began the subgenre of fourth-wall-breaking horror games. Well, at least for me. It makes text files or TXT files, accesses your browser, and minimizes itself, all in order to show you what the main antagonist, Whiteface, is capable of. Every so often while playing I'm Scared, the game will crash, and a new file will be available in the I'm Scared folder. As you play the game more and more, and before you finish it, you can never be too sure of whether or not the .exe file actually crashed when it says it did, or if the game just changed the size of the window, making it so while trying to see who messaged you on Messenger, you hear the distinctive laugh of Whiteface in the background. The only bad thing I will say after replaying it for this video is that the true ending forces you to get all the achievements. How could you be so honest? I don't remember that being the case the first time I played it, so maybe it's just a recent update or something, but I can never figure out how to get some of those achievements, and I guess I'll just never get the true ending this time around. It's actually a bit funny why this game scared me so much when I was in college, but it doesn't really have much to do with the game. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game's audio and use of pixelated graphics and fourth wall breaking mechanics were all thoroughly unsettling, but I remember it so well because of this one time that me and Ed were at Taco Bell like at 12 a.m. when it was uncharacteristically cold. This guy just walks in with a ski mask on, like completely covering his face. Ed and I were getting some Baja Blast and just chilling out by the fountain drinks, and the guy in the ski mask just kind of walks up to us, not saying a word, and just like stares at us. Because of the fact he was wearing a ski mask, we just kind of assumed that we were gonna get stabbed that night. We both kind of accepted our fate. Well, the guy did turn out to be pretty friendly, had no ill intentions. For some reason, the ski mask and how it hung on his face always kind of reminded me of Whiteface from I'm Scared. After that little interaction, for some reason the game stuck with me. I don't know if I had finished it before that interaction, but I do remember that game because of it. Obviously, I Am Scared was not as popular as Doki Doki Literature Club or Pony Island, but I think that if you're a fan of those types of games, it might be worth checking out. It falls into a category of games that were passion projects and done by a few people, and I think it's worth the $4 and change you're charging for it on Steam. Cry of Fear, at that time, and to some extent now, was the closest I ever got to experiencing some of the raw fighting I saw in the Condemned series due to its dodge mechanic and use of the first-person perspective. The main character's name is Simon. When you take control of Simon, you find yourself walking the streets of a Scandinavian city, trying to make your way home on foot. From there, the game truly begins. I have to admit that the voice acting and graphics are a little rough, due to this being a mod for Half-Life, but goddammit, is it awesome. At first, all Simon has to defend himself is a pocket knife, but eventually finds various weapons at his disposal, such as a Glock, shotgun, police baton, hunting rifle, M16, and even the VP-70, exactly like Resident Evil 2, except with something a little bit closer to the actual crazy as fuck fire rate it has in real life. Speaking of RE2, this entire game was my introduction to the type of games trying to capture the spirit of old school survival horror in a new package. These games were very much meant for old fucks like me, that really loved games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. In fact, The best way to describe the symbolism and feel for Cry of Fear would be like a new version of Silent Hill 3, in the best possible way, but from a different perspective. Much like how Heather fights very phallic monsters to represent her fear of sexual assault or sex, the monsters in Cry of Fear represent Simon's fear of being assaulted and his struggles with thoughts and self-harm. Even the bosses represent different mental health or issues in life that Simon can either choose to deal with by fighting or not deal with by running away. Your decisions regarding those bosses have a direct consequence on the ending you'll get. With all that being said, it is made very clear that Simon is on a psychological journey, and the player is making the decision to either put Simon through the horror of dealing with his demons, or letting them grow and fester, which will lead to an act of violence to himself or others, or in the worst possible ending, both. The sometimes 9 Inch Nails style of music combined with the cold, liminal spaces are good things to convey the fear and pain of Simon as you direct him on his journey. I highly recommend this game for anyone who's a fan of survival horror and isn't afraid of heavy topics like or self-harm. If you played it and are looking for something very similar, but new, I'd suggest Nightmares of Decay, or I think it's called Nightmare of Decay. What Cry of Fear was to Silent Hill 3, Nightmare of Decay is to Resident Evil Remake. If you like Resident Evil Remake or essentially want to experience it in a different way, and love games that have a bunch of different callbacks to other survival horror games, I think you'll really enjoy Nightmares of Decay. Replaying it after almost 4 years back in 2020 and 6 years in 2022 brings me back to the peaceful nights where my only worry was trying to get to class on time, and finishing my assignments, I guess. Ed showed me many things I still fuck with today. They showed me so many different types of music and bands I still listen to. They even showed me how long-form YouTube content can be enjoyable. I'm glad that I met Ed, and I'm glad that they showed me this game, because even at that time, back in the mid to late 2010s, Silent Hills was just cancelled, like relatively recently, and I had no clue whether or not I'd ever seen another horror game like it. It was a good introduction on what was to come years later. Finally, we move on to a game that I ended up discovering on my own. At some point during 2021, I was watching some videos on YouTube trying to find any upcoming survival horror game titles. Along the way, I heard of a game titled Tormented Souls. The video left a link in the description to sign up for a chance to beta test the game. I was lucky enough to get a link. Even in the beta, the game immediately brought me back to how it felt to play Silent Hill 3 in my dorm. And I mean that in the best possible way. At the end of the day, that's part of the reason why I loved playing this game so much whenever it first came out, and still come back to it on occasion. This game centers around a character named Caroline Walker. She gets an invitation to visit a hospital saying something to the effect of, "You think you can just abandon us?" with a picture of 2 young girls that makes Caroline's head hurt when she attempts to look at it. Once at the hospital, she's knocked out. She wakes up in a bathtub naked and unfamiliar with how she got there. After getting dressed, Caroline comes to find that she's missing an eye, and the game begins. The puzzles, music, inventory/health status screen, and even the camera angles make me think this game feels like someone heard my prayer for a game like Silent Hill 3, but new. Walking through the halls of Windberger Hospital feels like a cross between Spencer Mansion and the Resident Evil series, and the various locations in Silent Hill 3. Creepy, but somehow familiar. Of all the games I played since getting the PC, this one by far was the one I was so happy to have been able to find. I absolutely loved everything about it, and highly recommend it to everyone who's a fan of old school survival horror. Whether you have a PC or not, this game is available from everything from the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch. It is available on everything, and I highly recommend it. Did you talk too much? A lot of things have changed for me since I made the original video, the critique of Silent Hill 2 and 3. I fortunately haven't touched PS Now since getting this PC from Super Chode. On top of Corpse Party, I was welcomed to a wonderful world of survival horror. Compared to where I was in 2020, many people say that we're in a booming era for survival horror. I didn't know at the time that Resident Evil 2 Remake was going to be, and is, a huge success, and that Resident Evil 8 was going to bring even more new Resident Evil fans to the series. Also, that technically with the remake of Resident Evil 3 a year later, new fans would now be able to play the remakes of all 3 original games. Plus, Resident Evil 4 Remake, despite what it is that some people are saying, it looks like it's going to be a fresh experience for old and new fans, and hopefully is going to correct the one thing I hated most about that game in the original. And the cherry on top of all this is that there's been rumors of a new Silent Hill game, whereas in 2020 there was never even a mention of it. I know nothing may come of the rumors of Silent Hill, but just knowing people are talking about it again is nice. On top of that, if you would have told me that Kendrick Lamar has a song titled Silent Hill in his most recently released album, that I just wouldn't believe you. That shit's awesome. I finally got to play Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition, and the original PC port of Silent Hill 3. Then of course GOG released Silent Hill 4 The Room. I know people shit on that game, but at least let me have this. Like, it's really rare for me to be able to recommend anything involving the Silent Hill series for a very long time. And I could technically say, if you've never played a Silent Hill game, don't have a PC powerful enough to like run an emulator, you can go play Silent Hill 4 and see if you want to play something better or if the series interests you. I couldn't say that before. And most importantly, I discovered a community of people like the Gaming Muse, Max Darrett, Avalanche Reviews, the Sphere Hunter, and so many different creators who absolutely love the Silent Hill franchise and survival horror games, and talk about them constantly. I don't feel so sad and I don't feel so alone as a fan of the survival horror subgenre, and it's that I'm probably most thankful about. Thank you for listening to me ramble.